Imagine a world where gravity didn't exist, where the universe remained a mystery, and where science was nothing more than superstition. Now, imagine one man changing everything. A man whose mind reshaped reality, whose discoveries redefined physics, and whose genius still influences our world today. That man was Isaac Newton, a lonely, obsessive, and brilliant thinker who cracked the code of the cosmos. But his story is far more than just an apple falling from a tree. This is the story of a man who battled the greatest minds of his era, lived a life of secrecy, and even dabbled in the dark arts. This is the story of Isaac Newton, the man who changed the universe forever. Stick around, because what you're about to hear is not just history, it's a tale of genius, rivalry, and obsession that will leave you speechless. 1. Early life and childhood. Isaac Newton was born on January 4, 1643, in Woolsthorpe, England. His birth was anything but ordinary, born prematurely, and so small that his mother thought he wouldn't survive. But Newton was never destined for an ordinary life. His father, also named Isaac Newton, died 3 months before he was born. His mother, Hannah Ayscough Newton, later remarried and left young Isaac in the care of his grandmother. Feeling abandoned, Newton buried himself in books, crafting intricate mechanical models, and experimenting with light and motion. Even as a child, it was clear he wasn't like the other kids. Newton spent hours observing nature, fascinated by the movement of the stars and the mechanics of everyday objects. He often built small inventions, such as sundials and windmills, out of sheer curiosity. His solitary nature led him to develop an intense imagination, dreaming of concepts far beyond his years. Unlike other children, he avoided games and social gatherings, preferring to sit alone and solve puzzles. His ability to focus on a single task for hours hinted at his future genius. His early notebooks were filled with sketches of mechanical designs, showing an advanced understanding of physics even before he had any formal education. Newton's curiosity was insatiable, and his desire to understand the world around him became the driving force of his life. 2. C.H. Schuling and D.A. First SIGNs of G in the U.S. Newton attended the King's School in Grantham, where he showed little interest in studies at first. But everything changed when a schoolyard bully challenged him. Determined to outshine his rival, Newton became obsessed with academics, topping his class and gaining recognition for his intelligence. Newton was known for his silent demeanor and deep concentration. While his classmates enjoyed their free time, he spent hours building watercocks and sundials. He quickly gained a reputation for his ability to solve complex mathematical problems that baffled even his teachers. His notebooks from this period reveal an early fascination with geometry and astronomy. While lodging with an apothecary in Grantham, he gained access to books on chemistry and alchemy, which sparked his lifelong interest in experimental science. He conducted small-scale experiments, mixing chemicals and observing their reactions. His ability to recall vast amounts of information was extraordinary, and he often amazed his peers with his deep knowledge of various subjects. By 1661, Newton entered Trinity College, Cambridge. He studied Aristotle and the classical curriculum, but found it lacking. Instead, he turned to the works of Galileo, Descartes, and Kepler. Little did he know, he was on the verge of discoveries that would rewrite science forever. At Cambridge, Newton rarely socialized. 3. The Plague Year and a Revolutionary Discovery. In 1665, the Great Plague hit London, forcing Cambridge to shut down. Newton returned home, and in isolation, he experienced what he later called his annus mirabilis, his miraculous year. During this time, He developed the fundamentals of calculus, optics, and the laws of motion and gravity. Newton's time in Woolsthorpe was far from idle. He spent countless hours in his small room, scribbling equations on scraps of paper. His obsession with light led him to conduct experiments by staring directly at the sun and nearly blinding himself. He also used a prism to break white light into a spectrum of colors, proving that light wasn't a single entity, but composed of different wavelengths. This was when the famous apple incident supposedly occurred. While it's debated whether the apple actually hit his head, the story reflects a deeper truth Newton realized, that the same force pulling the apple down was the same force governing the motion of planets. He meticulously calculated the force required to keep the moon in orbit, laying the foundation for his law of universal gravitation. Newton's method of thinking was revolutionary. He didn't just observe phenomena. He sought to quantify and explain them with mathematical precision. During this time, he also developed early forms of differential and integral calculus, though he called it the method of fluxions. These mathematical tools would later become essential in physics and engineering. His groundbreaking work remained largely unknown at the time, as Newton was hesitant to publish his findings. He built his first reflecting telescope, proving that mirrors could be used instead of lenses to eliminate chromatic aberration. This invention would later revolutionize astronomy. His isolation during the plague years was perhaps the most productive period of his life, proving that sometimes solitude breeds genius. 4. The Principia, a masterpiece of science. Newton returned to Cambridge in 1667, and by 1687 he published his magnum opus, Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. This single book laid the foundation for classical physics, introducing Newton's three laws of motion and the universal law of gravitation. His theories weren't just revolutionary, they were terrifyingly accurate. With his equations, Newton could predict planetary orbits and explain why objects move the way they do. It was as if he had unlocked the secrets of the universe with mathematics. Newton's Principia wasn't just a book, it was a weapon against ignorance. It systematically dismantled centuries of Aristotelian physics, proving that the universe was governed by precise mathematical laws, not divine whims. His three laws of motion became the backbone of modern mechanics, used in everything from engineering to space exploration. The publication of Principia wasn't smooth sailing. Newton faced opposition from many scholars, particularly Robert Hooke, who claimed he had already discovered aspects of gravity. But Newton's work was far more comprehensive, offering a unified explanation of celestial and terrestrial motion. His law of universal gravitation proposed that every object in the universe attracts every other object with a force proportional to their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. This was a radical concept before Newton. No one had been able to explain why planets stayed in their orbits. 5. Revolutionized, and a dark side. Newton wasn't just a scientist, he was also a man consumed by obsession and secrecy. He had bitter rivalries with some of the greatest minds of his time. His most infamous conflict was with German mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz over who invented calculus first. The debate turned into a war, with both men accusing the other of plagiarism. Newton had actually developed calculus years before Leibniz, but had kept his work private. When Leibniz published his version of calculus, Newton and his supporters accused him of theft. The Royal Society launched an investigation led by none other than Newton himself. Not surprisingly, the final report declared Newton the true inventor, permanently damaging Leibniz's reputation. But this wasn't Newton's only feud. He also clashed with astronomer Robert Hooke, who challenged his ideas. In response, Newton went to extreme lengths to erase Hooke's contributions from history, even allegedly removing his only known portrait from the Royal Society after Hooke's death. Newton's paranoia and need for control made him a ruthless opponent. He held grudges for decades and used his influence to silence rivals. Even his allies feared crossing him, knowing that he would stop at nothing to discredit those who opposed him. His obsession extended beyond science. Newton spent years studying alchemy, convinced he could turn base metals into gold. He believed in the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that could grant eternal life. While modern science dismisses alchemy, Newton's alchemical experiments helped him develop groundbreaking insights into chemical reactions. 6 later years and Unen expectedcarsat. Despite his fame in science, Newton took an unexpected turn later in life. In 1696, he was appointed Warden of the Royal Mint and later became its master. His job: to catch counterfeiters. Newton approached this role with the same intensity he applied to physics. He personally interrogated criminals, used spies, and ensured counterfeiting was punishable by death. He was no longer just a scientist. He was now one of England's most feared law enforcers. His work at the Mint was brutal and relentless. He disguised himself and ventured into the criminal underworld of London, gathering intelligence on counterfeiters. He compiled detailed reports, tracking the activities of those who dared to tamper with the currency. Many of the counterfeiters he prosecuted were sentenced to execution. Newton's dedication transformed the Royal Mint. He introduced new techniques to prevent fraud, improving the quality and security of England's coinage. His efforts stabilized the economy and left a lasting impact on the financial system. Despite his success at the Mint, Newton grew increasingly paranoid. He saw enemies everywhere, often accusing colleagues of conspiring against him. His obsession with secrecy, which had driven his scientific work, now fueled his distrust of those around him. In 1703, Newton became president of the Royal Society, a position he held until his death. He used this role to cement his legacy, ensuring that his achievements were recognized while his rivals were forgotten. In his later years, Newton experienced frequent health problems, possibly due to prolonged exposure to mercury from his alchemical experiments. 7 Death and Lei J.C.W. Isaac Newton passed away on March 31, 1727, at the age of 84. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, an honour reserved for Britain's greatest figures. His legacy: unparalleled. His discoveries laid the foundation for modern physics, engineering, and space exploration. Every rocket launch, every bridge, and every piece of modern technology owes something to Newton's laws. Albert Einstein once said, "Newton, forgive me." Even as Einstein developed relativity, he acknowledged Newton's immense impact. Newton's work wasn't just revolutionary, it was the beginning of everything we understand about the universe today. Even in his final years, Newton remained intellectually active, revising his works and engaging in scholarly debates. His mind never rested, constantly searching for deeper truths about the universe. Despite his wealth and fame, he lived a relatively modest life, choosing knowledge over luxury. Newton's legacy is immeasurable. His laws of motion and universal gravitation laid the foundation for modern physics. His work influenced countless scientists, including Albert Einstein, who once said, "I have stood on the shoulders of giants," acknowledging Newton's immense contributions. Beyond physics, Newton's advancements in calculus transformed mathematics, shaping fields as diverse as engineering, economics, and computer science. 8. Newton and the Royal Society, leader of scientific progress. In 1703, Newton became the president of the Royal Society, the most prestigious scientific institution of its time. Under his leadership, the Royal Society flourished, promoting scientific research and experimentation across Europe. Newton used his influence to support new discoveries and expand the reach of scientific thought. However, his tenure was not without controversy. He continued his feud with Leibniz over calculus and worked tirelessly to suppress rival scientists. Despite his aggressive leadership style, his presidency cemented his role as the defining scientific authority of the 18th century. Newton's time at the Royal Society also saw him mentor a new generation of scientists. His guidance helped shape the work of astronomers, physicists, and mathematicians who would carry forward his legacy. His impact on the institution remains profound, with the Royal Society still standing today as a beacon of scientific excellence. 9. Newton's theoretical studies. Alcemi and the philosophers stony. While Newton is remembered for his groundbreaking work in physics, he was equally fascinated by alchemy, the mystical precursor to modern chemistry. He spent decades conducting secret experiments, searching for the legendary philosopher's stone, a substance believed to turn base metals into gold and grant eternal life. Newton left behind thousands of pages of alchemical notes, many of which remained hidden for centuries. His belief in alchemy was not unusual for the time, but his dedication to it was extraordinary. Some historians argue that his alchemical studies influenced his scientific discoveries, particularly in chemistry and material science. Despite his brilliance, Newton never succeeded in transmuting metals or achieving immortality. Yet, his relentless pursuit of knowledge, whether scientific or mystical, showcased his boundless curiosity about the nature of the universe. 10. Newton's vision of the future, predictions and perphecis. Newton was not only concerned with understanding the past and present, but also spent considerable time contemplating the future. Based on his interpretations of biblical prophecies, he predicted that the world would undergo a major transformation in the year 2060. He believed that this event would not be the end of the world, but rather the beginning of a new era of divine order. His writings suggest that he saw history as following a divine blueprint, with scientific progress playing a key role in humanity's destiny. While many of his religious predictions remain speculative, his scientific foresight was remarkable. Newton anticipated technological advancements that would one day revolutionize society, though he could not have imagined the full extent of modern scientific progress. Even in his final years, he remained convinced that humanity had only begun to uncover the vast mysteries of existence. His legacy continues to inspire scientists, theologians, and historians alike, proving that his mind was as boundless as the universe he sought to understand. So, what do you think? Was Newton simply a genius, or was he something more, an obsessive mind that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge to their very limits? His life was a mix of brilliance, rivalry, and mystery. And yet, every time we look at the stars, drive a car, or use modern technology, we are living in Newton's universe. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments who should we cover next. See you in the next one.